Welcome to the Psych Central Show, where each episode presents an in-depth look at issues from the fields of psychology and mental health. With your host, Gabe Howard, and featuring Vincent M. Wales.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of the Psych Central Show. With me, as always, is Vincent M. Wales. Hey, say hi.
Hi.
My name is Gabe Howard, and let's go ahead and get started. Vin and I decided that we were going to discuss whether or not a person should disclose whether or not they have a mental health issue, mental illness in the workplace.
It's a tough issue, yeah, because on the one hand, very few people really want to, hide who they are. But on the other hand, there is often a very real risk of losing your job, as at least one person on this podcast knows.
My story with mental illness starts, frankly, very typically in that I did not know that I had bipolar disorder. And then one day I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And it really took me by surprise. I didn't realize that the feelings that I had, the suicidal thoughts, the depression, the mania, I thought all of that was just my personality. My parents reinforced this by trying to punish the behaviors away from me, and it just kept going and going and going until obviously I was diagnosed. When I was diagnosed, I was working a job, and I was put in a psychiatric facility, so obviously I had to call my work and use short-term disability, and I was off work for 6 weeks. And I'd been at that job for a few years then. I was doing remarkably well. I was the youngest person the company ever hired. I was making a lot of money. It was the late 90s, and I worked in computers, networking, and IT, back before the tech bubble burst. So since I could spell the word computer, people just threw $100 bills at me. So when I came back to work, people said, "Where have you been?" I had no reason to lie. Remember, before I left, I was a superstar. And I was a superstar in every way. I was in tech in the late 90s. I was a male. I was making great money. And I was really highly regarded. So I saw no reason to lie. I said, hey, I was put in the hospital for a psychiatric issue. I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. I have a mental illness. I was suicidal. And everything changed.
I'll bet.
It changed not well. There's a whole long and involved story. I won't bore people with it. It all ended with, of course, me being, we can use a lot of different words here. We can say terminated, forced to quit. The actual end was I was off work for being sick. Another time, about a year later, I was in an outpatient treatment program, and they called up and they said, "We have reviewed your medical records, and you are not in fact bipolar disorder. You do not in fact have bipolar disorder. You are lying. You are committing fraud against the company, and if you don't report to work tomorrow at your scheduled start time, you will be terminated." I, of course, said, "Hey, I'm not lying. I am sick." They said, "We don't see it this way. We had an independent review. You no longer have short-term disability. You no longer have anything. You need to come back to work because, you're committing fraud." They really hit that fraud word hard. And I told them that I could not. And they said, "Well, then you're resigning." And that was the end of that. There's, a little more here and there, but I looked back on it from that moment and thought, wow, if I had just kept my mouth shut, if I had just told them that, I broke
just
my
said you
ankle.
Had the stomach flu.
Right.
Something like that.
Gone with something that people don't ask a lot of follow-up questions, but I saw no reason to lie because I didn't think there was anything wrong with it. I was diagnosed with a medical condition. Why would people become fearful of me? And it turned out very, very poorly. So let's go ahead and talk about the next few years. I stayed quiet. Mum was the word. The next job I had, I told nobody I had mental illness. The job after that, the people that I met, I was not the loud I just was not loud. And I kept to myself because I wanted to stay working because, I needed health insurance and I needed a job and I needed money. So I didn't tell anybody that I was sick with anything. And that felt equally bad, but I had a paycheck. So lie to myself and have health insurance and money, or be honest and, not have health insurance and money. And listen, not having health insurance and money means, not having wellness at all. So for me, it was very, very difficult. It was very, very difficult, but I ultimately decided to tell everybody I know, and now I have a podcast. So I guess it worked out. But it's not so easy as you're going to regale us in stories of people that
Yeah, there's all kinds of different things that a lot of people in our society might choose to keep secret to prevent either losing a job or becoming an outcast in their social circle. Whether they're gay or they're an atheist or something along those lines. And therein lies, my little story. I am an atheist, and many years ago on my personal website, which was an anonymous site, I had a series of articles about atheism and non-belief and all of that. And a job that I had applied for, and this is my own stupidity I'm about to describe here, they were asking for a lot of different qualities in their new employee, one of which was web design work. So I gave them, a bunch of different links of sites that I had designed, one of which was my personal one, which, you probably see where this is going. When they looked at that site, they dug a little deeper into it, they found those particular articles, and then they decided that I was not worth hiring. And this was after they had already offered me the job. There was somebody else in the company who went in and looked at it and said, no, we don't want him.
So what's interesting is we like to normalize mental illness. You can lead a good life and be mentally ill. The world is not so different for people with mental illness, except for these targeted areas that we're trying to improve. And unfortunately, this is one of those examples where the world is just discriminating against people that are abnormal. I'm making the air quotes. I guess we're not on video. So people are getting discriminated against for all kinds of things, race, religion, non-religion, gender, sexuality, and of course, mental illness. So it's very, very difficult to decide just how far removed from ourselves we want to be.
Mm-hmm. And that's where what it really comes down to. I mean, if your question is, should I say or should I know, then it's really just a matter of your personal comfort zone. If you're okay with keeping your mental illness to yourself because you are not wanting to deal with any of the negative consequences, then fine, then don't. Keep it to yourself. But a lot of us aren't okay with that, and we want to be our full selves around others. And so again, there you've got your quandary. Which way do I lean?
And of course, in your case, you weren't deciding whether to disclose or not disclose. You were just being yourself. You wrote an anonymous website, and you accidentally disclosed. And this is a bit of a trick for people living with mental illness as well. So let's say that you make the determination that you are not going to disclose. Certainly, you're right. Nobody's judging you for doing so. Makes life easier in many, many ways. And besides, who wants to be known as the sick person? So those are the positive columns in not telling everybody that you're living with mental illness. It's none of their business, and that's not what you want to be known for. You want to be known for, many other things. Not everybody is me. But then you accidentally do it. And in your case, like you said, it was stupidity, again, making the air quotes, because you gave them your site, which had this content on it. But when it comes to an illness, you can accidentally disclose by being symptomatic at work.
That's true.
You can accidentally disclose by somebody reviewing your medical records without your permission. HIPAA is not ironclad. It's supposed to be, but, I can't think of how many times my doctors have left voicemails on my work phone. Gabe, this is blah, 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 behavioral health, confirming your appointment for 6. Now, in my case, my voicemail was private, so I'm the only one that got it, but, they don't know that. They don't know who's reviewing my voicemails, so I could have been outed, for lack of a better term, that way. So now we've got that balancing act. So here are all the reasons not to disclose. I've decided not to do it, and
Right.
And
let me get back to the Oh, sorry, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, hit it. Go.
Well, I was going to get back to the whole anonymity thing, as I was referring before. Yeah, my blog was private. My name was not attached to it in any way, shape, or form. And a lot of people have blogs and whatnot online today that are anonymous, and they talk about their lives, and they talk about their mental health, and they talk about this, that, and the other thing. Thing of it is, anonymity isn't ironclad either. Somebody's going to figure it out. Some people will know. Your friends are going to know. And you just never know when something's going to get whispered down the lane and come back to your employer. It's like, oh, that's this person's website? I didn't know that. Let's see what it says. And hello.
Not to fall too far down the rabbit hole, but I think it warrants saying that people lose their jobs over unfounded rumors all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So, having a founded rumor or even something that's based enough on circumstantial evidence that it's probably you, in some cases, could be enough. So I don't mean to issue, a warning to people that are writing online anonymously or putting stuff on their social media channels that don't want to disclose, but it is a fair warning. The internet is vast and the stuff on there lives forever. So if you're writing about living with a mental health issue, it could get back to your employer, even if you are doing it privately, anonymously, etc. But let's switch gears for a moment. Obviously, I finally chose to disclose. And Vin, you're on a podcast where you talk about living with depression as well. So, hey, you have obviously chosen to disclose as well. What are the benefits in disclosing? Our case is a little different. The benefits for us is, hey, we get a podcast and I can speak about it. But you're a little more less like Gabe. This is your only foray into public.
Well, and I am a not Gabe in that I don't really feel that my condition is that big of a deal in certain ways. It's not one that is debilitating for long periods of time. I have persistent depressive disorder. So in other words, it's something that remains fairly steady from one day to the next. I have bad days, sure, but I don't miss very much work time because of it. Certainly no more than a typical person would miss due to, being sick for other reasons. And also in my day job, I kind of work on the periphery of the mental health community too. So there is nothing for me to be ashamed about as far as the workplace. There's no reason that I would have any concerns about it. My family knows, my friends know. I don't really feel that it's detrimental for me to admit to it.
One of the reasons to disclose, of course, is there's a mental health movement. There's a movement to try to show people that people living with mental illness are just like everybody else. And that's very difficult to do if every time you see somebody living well with mental illness who's a doctor, a lawyer, a successful accountant, a homeowner, married, etc., you don't know that they have mental illness. For example, I look just like everybody else. So if you said, hey, that gentleman is married, he owns a nice house, he has a good job, and he's a really cool guy, and you don't know that I have bipolar disorder, then the minute you hear about bipolar disorder and all of the negatives, that's going to be your only experience. So one of the reasons that I personally ultimately decided to disclose is for advocacy reasons. I want people to know that if you are diagnosed with these disorders, you can live a typical life. You can get better. When I was first diagnosed, I could think of nobody living well with any mental illness. So I had decided to quit my job, liquidate my assets, and move into a halfway house. And it was hopeless. It was incredibly hopeless. So I want to come out, again, for lack of a better term, so that everybody diagnosed after me can say, okay, it's going to be okay. Gabe did it. These people did it. So that's a very powerful reason, as far as I'm concerned, to be out for an advocacy state.
Sure. Makes perfect sense. There are other reasons too, though. If you know anybody who is in the closet, whether it's about mental illness or their sexuality or what have you, and they're miserable, who wants to be miserable? Who wants to live a lie? Who wants to live as anything that's not their full self publicly? So being true to yourself, I think, has a lot of value for your own mental health.
It's sad, of course, that the discrimination and the stigma surrounding mental health diagnoses makes us have to consider this at all. For example, if I get a bad haircut, I don't think, hey, should I go to work on Monday because I might get fired for having a bad haircut? There's no stigma and discrimination attached to a bad haircut. There's just a ridiculous amount of, I can't even think of the right word, Vin, but just garbage surround. The illness is bad enough. And what society heaps on it due to lack of understanding, lack of education, is of course terrible. And it makes it more difficult to deal with the illness when you're also dealing with these misguided expectations that people have of you. And like I said before, it's terrible to decide whether or not you want to be who you are or you want to have a job. And in our society, job equals health insurance equals care equals wellness. And when you have an illness, you need care, and somebody has to pay for it. So this is one of the reasons that we do this. But you know, we've talked about reasons to come out for mental health reasons. We've talked about reasons to be honest about, and you know what? I'm going to back that up. I don't want to say be honest about living with mental illness. I just want to say disclose, because all of us are honest to ourselves. We're not lying to ourselves. We know what's wrong. We're telling ourselves the truth. We just find it so incredibly difficult to tell other people for fear of what they're going to do to us. Mm-hmm. And they think we're the bad judged. Guys. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And fear of not having access to the same resources and opportunities as other people. One of the things that people ask me when I speak, they're like, listen, if you were me, would you come out? First, I can't answer that. That's not up to me. But I always answer it like this. For the cause and to move this down the road and to make life better for the next generation of people that are going to be diagnosed with mental illness, absolutely. You know, stand up and be counted. Let's show people that people with mental illness, you know, can and do lead meaningful lives. But it's going to be a fight. And you've got to decide if you're able to fight. And if you're able to fight, you know, people like, you know, Vin and I will stand with you. If you're not able to fight, hold back until you are. Educate your family. Start small. You don't necessarily have to tell your employer on day one. Maybe just tell your mom and dad, your friends, you know, your church, your social circle. And that has an incredible amount of value. Vin, do you have anything to add?
No, I just hope that anybody listening to this who is equivocating now feels a little bit better about things.
There are a lot of people living successful lives with mental illness. We just don't talk about it enough. PsychCentral.com has a ton of forums, a ton of writing about openly living with mental illness and living with mental illness, you know, on the down low. So you are not alone. Like our Facebook page, read all of those resources and know that there are millions of people in your corner, even if we're not always loud. So thank you very much, and we will see you next week.
PsychCentral.com is the internet's oldest and largest independent mental health website. Psych Central is overseen by Dr. John Grohall, a mental health expert and one of the pioneering leaders in online mental health. Our host, Gabe Howard, is a professional speaker, award-winning writer, and mental health advocate. You can find more information on Gabe and his work at gabehoward.com. Vincent M. Wales is an award-winning speculative fiction novelist and suicide prevention crisis counselor. You can find more information on Vincent at vincentmwales.com. If you have feedback about the show, please email talkback@psychcentral.com.